Yeah, look who it is. Surprise, surprise. One of the legends in broadcasting in my life, a mentor of mine, Michelangelo Signorile. It's great to see you. Thank you for saying yes to talking to me today.
Hi, Pete. Great to see you.
How are you?
I'm doing okay, considering the hellscape that we're living in, but you always have to give it that qualification when people say, "How are you?" Right? Like it's like, yeah, well, uh doing okay considering, but we're everything is a cloud over us.
Yes, yes. That's why I like to start it there just to see how people answer that question given what would you describe the atmosphere of America right now in terms of the authority? I mean, people are using all kinds of terminology from dictatorship to autocracy to competitive authoritarianism. Is that right? To
Mhm.
oligarchy. Like, what words do you use generally speaking on the radio show, or what do you think is most accurate or effective to describe how far it's gotten or gone?
I would say all of the above. It depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about Trump's demeanor and instinct, then you're definitely talking about dictator, authoritarian, somebody who wants to be that. If you're talking about what the country has become, well, I don't think it's quite gotten there yet, but he's doing things to instill that. And he's obviously got the military in the streets. He is taking shares of companies. That's a state capitalism thing, copying China and Russia. So he is trying to do that, but we have a lot of checks and balances in this country. They're being tested. If you could really transform this country into a competitive autocracy or whatever it is, people are calling it, we will see. But so far, he's trying, but we're fighting
There's something
back.
there's some truth to what he said the other day, which is a weird phrase, about some people might want a dictatorship. I don't think they would call it that, but I do. I feel like I evolved on this idea of talking about democracy because I realized that most Americans don't know what democracy is. So all this talk about saving it or else, I'm not sure how much it resonated because we don't realize how good we have it. And so I do think there are a lot of people that if you just ask them, do you just want someone that is going to make decisions and run government like a business, like they always said? Or do you want people arguing, ideas all the time and it's slower moving? I think there would be a lot of people be like, yeah, yeah, just give me daddy, just give me a
Oh
king.
yeah.
Do you think that?
Well, I mean, there's a whole strain. I think there are a few things going on. There's a whole strain of MAGA, um, going way back, that has talked about wanting a strong man, wanting we had that whole movement of we need a new Caesar, right? They want the idea of a dictator. They want somebody taking over. They believe democracy hasn't worked. They believe that democracy has allowed for these quote unquote minority groups to get power over the majority, right? And make them into the persecuted ones. So there have been those people who definitely are in that movement, and they've kind of given Trump a lot of his mojo. But I do think there are a lot of people for whom all of this talk is very abstract.
Right.
They're not people who really get deeply into it. They may not understand it. They may not be very educated about this stuff or whatever. They're just responding to the simple promise, right? I'm going to bring prices down. And I say this because I think Zoran Mamdani, has sort of, you know, been able to do something similar, and it's frustrating Fox News so badly. But of course, what he represents in democratic socialism is not a bad thing like fascism, but it's a term people don't understand. And so when you ask people about it, they'll say, well, I don't know, I don't think we want that. Just like if you ask them about fascism, they would say, I don't think we want that. But when they try to demonize Mamdani as a democratic socialist, it's not working, because he has simply connected with, I'm going to bring the price of housing down, I'm going to bring this down. And he's connecting with them on a personal level, really bonding with them. So I think part of that is what's going on with Trump, in addition to this movement that really wants a strong man.
Say more about Mamdani and your thoughts on him. You live and work in New York City. Do you know him? Have you ever interviewed him?
I've had him on my show. I don't know him personally, but I've interviewed him on my show. He's, I think, an enormous talent as a politician. Number one, he just really uh, connects with people, but knows how to communicate. And in this very new landscape that we have, he's native to it, and he is able to connect with people through all of these avenues, TikTok and other social media. And I think he's somebody who's very charismatic, but he also understands policy very deeply. And I think the most brilliant thing he's been able to do is translate policy, complicated policy, into these videos and social media platforms. Because most of the people, we've always thought, oh, he's really good on social media. It's because they do great slapdowns and memes and this and that. I think of like the old John Fetterman, right? Mamdani is actually giving heavy duty policy on these platforms, and he's doing it in a fun way. So I think he has been able to captivate people, and he's also been able to neutralize the opposition on a lot of the hot button issues. He makes no he makes no concessions about his beliefs. He thinks it's a genocide, right, in Gaza. He is committing $30 million to trans affirming care for transgender youth. Now, New York's very liberal, but there's MAGA all over New York, and trans issues are still complicated, and yet that stuff doesn't get, he talked to me about all that, but that's not what he talks about generally. He
Right.
talks about bringing housing down. And when I look at the map as a New Yorker, I'm really amazed at who voted for him. And looking even on Staten Island, where you had whole places where Cuomo should have blown it out, and where Trump blew it out, and Mamdani got a lot of support. So that's all very interesting.
What do you make of it? Is interesting the way you're saying it too. What do you make of the Democratic Party's reaction, whether they are embracing him or having a no comment or not? I mean, what do you make of all that? Do you think that's purely about like the Israeli lobby and the Arab-Israeli conflict, that issue, or do you think that it's about like the word socialism? Or I mean, and then the other, I think, fair question is, does his brand might work in New York, but will that work for a Democrat running in Kansas?
Well, it, it is working for those other Democrats, and I'll get to that in a second. Um, I think the Democratic leadership is being really stupid. I think they're being very, very overly cautious in a moment when you need to go for broke. You have nothing to lose. We have this, authoritarian attempt here by Trump, right? And I think some of what you're saying about Mamdani regarding, the Israeli lobby and money that comes from AIPAC, that's certainly part of it. But it's also the fear of somebody called a socialist, and the fear of where it will go, and the fear of his policies. And he's popular now, but if he becomes mayor, will he be a failure, and will they be stuck with it, and whatever. I'm sure all of that's going through them, and they listen to these consultants, and the consultants are all, these centrist Democrats who try to pull everything the other way. So I just think they're being stupid, because they should be hitching onto his wagon. They should be doing what he's doing. And the smart ones are beyond the leadership. If you look at the election we just saw in Iowa, for example,
Yep.
Caitlin Dry, who flipped a red seat in the legislature and killed the supermajority in the Republican Party there, in a district Donald Trump won by 11. She is somebody who, the core of what she has sort of represented as a politician has been abortion rights and other issues. But what did she talk about during the campaign? Housing affordability, making the rent cheaper, groceries.
Mm.
So they're all doing, the ones who are successful are doing Mamdani. They're just doing it in their way in Iowa instead of, in New York. We're seeing it in other races too.
I actually talked with our friend Zach Walls, who's running for U.S. Senate. Have you talked to him lately?
I haven't talked to him in a while, but yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah, he's running now for Joni Ernst's seat
Yeah,
against. I mean, it's a primary, but
I'll probably have him on. Yeah.
yeah, but really interesting points about that with Mamdani. Going back to what we're seeing right now from our authoritarian leader, our Mad King Schittler. Uh, do you think, like Gavin Newsom and a lot of my listeners think, and maybe I'm misrepresenting Newsom, that basically there are two kinds of Americans over here on Earth One. Those of us who think there's going to be a midterm or another election, and those of us who think he's trying to prevent there from being an election. Do you think that there's going to be a midterm election happening? I mean, he's basically saying you're dreaming if you think he's not going to try to stop the election. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's going to be a midterm election. And I think that the proof of that is that they're trying to rig it. They wouldn't be wasting all their time on this gerrymandering, campaign if they weren't really afraid. And Trump's really afraid of Republicans losing because then he's facing investigations, he's facing impeachment, he's going to have a really miserable several years. So they're worried about it. They are doing the gerrymandering. He's doing the military, perhaps to intimidate people with voting. Who knows?
Right.
He's definitely setting up the lawsuits and claims of cheating. He keeps talking about mail-in ballots. I don't see them moving to stop the actual election. I don't know how they do that because we have local elections. We don't have a federal election. But I do see them doing what they can to mitigate it in terms of voter suppression, the gerrymandering, and probably filing lawsuits. So there will be an election, and they're going to do everything they can to rig it. Will they be able to do enough? I have to say that after looking at that race in Iowa and seeing a Democrat flip a red seat in a Trump won district, he won by 11 points and she won by 10. After seeing the previous special election in Iowa, after seeing all these other special elections, even if they gerrymander all these seats, Democrats are winning in seats that Republicans have won comfortably. So I still have faith that we're going to have an enormous turnout and the Republicans are in trouble.
What do you make of the energy you're seeing with protests and at town halls in red districts and so on? I mean, it's loud. I've been part of it here in 17 against Mike Lawler. I'm inspired by it, but it's hard to know how big it is because on the flip side of it, and I'm a pretty optimistic person, on the flip side of it, I was just in Boston on a college tour with my daughter, going to New York City all the time, go to a concert, go to a fair. Most people seem pretty apathetic and pretty happy and pretty comfortable everywhere you go and look. But in our silos, if you will, who care about politics, we work in political media, I'm certainly paying attention to wherever there's resistance, and I want to give it a lot of credit. But then on the flip side, what I just said about my other anecdotal experience, what do you make of the energy of the, quote, resistance or the anti-Trump movement or the anti-fascist movement across the country?
I think it's big. I think it's really smarter, more strategic, and more organized than the last time.
Hmm.
Sending, hundreds of thousands of people to Washington, spending all that money, especially now dealing with Trump and the military, that wouldn't be the way to go. Having individual protests in cities across the country, having people go to town halls, I think it's a much more useful way for people to get involved. And what you say about what you hear anecdotally, it was like that in the first term too. I mean, there's always going to be, and frankly, it's like that in every administration. There's always going to be the people who are deeply involved, and most of the country is apathetic. Let's be honest. But the people who are deeply involved on our side are really involved, and they're organized, and they're getting people excited. And what I think the Republicans have a problem with is I don't think their base is excited. Yeah, they have their sort of hardcore, crazies, but I don't think their base is excited. I think Trump put together a different coalition this time to get his 1.4% win, and that coalition included these young people, including young men who are not going to be as loyal. They're already pulling away. They're already saying, "Hey, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this." They are not people who really get out to vote anyway, and and so he's going to have a problem with them. He's going to have a problem with any of the Latinos who we see it in all the numbers shifted to him. They're going to have an enthusiasm problem, and I don't think we're going to have that.
What do you make, and how much do you talk on your show, and do people think and talk about these deportations? I mean, it's every day I hear, if you pay a lot of attention, which of course I do, another several nightmares, anecdotes of people being snatched or being deported, American citizens sometimes, much less actual people who have committed misdemeanors and so on. It feels like because we're seeing the imagery all the time on social media, you're actually witnessing it. It's horrifying to people, and it doesn't go away because it's happening every day. They've got these quotas. You've been writing about Stephen Miller at your excellent Substack. If people aren't subscribed, you should go over and subscribe to Mike's Substack, which he's been doing as long as anybody. The Signorile report is so good. I love it. I actually open that email and read it. What do you make of what you're seeing? And I mean, you get a lot of them, but I always open yours, is what I'm saying, So what do you make of the whole deportation immigration nightmare, and what are your, how much is it part of the conversation?
It's a big part of the conversation. It's horrific, and it is, I think, a disaster for Trump and the Republicans, in addition to being a terrible humanitarian horror show and just so so painful for so many families and so many people across the country. Other people are seeing that. They're seeing the pain. They know that people are in their communities. They know that people are those who they've worked with, and of course they're in many families. It's not the criminals that Trump said he was going to be rounding up. So they see it all, and it is horrifying them. And he actually took an issue that was his strongest issue, immigration, and now he's underwater with it.
Yeah.
Completely because of these deportations. And a lot of it is also, we have to be thankful that they're so inept and they mismanage so many things, because if you look at the details on this concentration camp they built in Florida, right, that they called Alligator Alcatraz, they never had even near capacity. They now have, maybe, I think the latest reports are it'll be down to 0 people. The judge told them to shut it down. But even before that, they weren't even putting people in there. They didn't need the place. If you're deporting people, why are you building these camps anyway? DeSantis claims he's building another one. He spent $250 million. I think all of it just shows that they're performative on some level, and they're cruel. They're very cruel, and people are seeing that. And you talked about the videos. They're getting into everybody's consciousness. There are too many stories for the media to report on. And it's almost become more of, at least the way I've been tracking it, and I have people on my show, reporters come on to talk about stories. It's almost become the local media reports on what happens locally, and every city. And I think a lot of people don't realize this. They think, I see all these stories on, I see something on social media. Is that getting coverage? It may not be getting national news coverage, but in all the localities where this is happening, the local media are covering these stories. And these are people in the community. These are people who buy their groceries from, or work with, at a restaurant, or, know from school, know their parents. And they're horrifying stories. And I think it's really resonating.
The most horrifying story, of course, was the shooting that happened in Minneapolis this week. And I want to talk with you about that from the standpoint of how the right-wing MAGA echo chamber is looking at it, which in case people aren't paying attention, and I wouldn't blame you not, it's all about this kid being trans.
Right.
Another shooter apparently who identified as trans. They're not just saying they were all trans. A lot of people, mainstream right-wingers, are just using this as the excuse and so on. And I want to know how you're handling that and how you're talking about the issue that this or what you think about how they've attached to that aspect of the kid. Obviously, I think almost no matter what, it's always we should start with it's the guns first and foremost. But as a result of the fact that he identified as trans, apparently, and the things that he'd written that have gotten out there, what do you make of that? It seems pretty dangerous and pretty horrific the way that the conversation about it.
It is, and it's opportunistic and it's transparent too. It's like finally we have a school shooting covered on Fox News because the shooter is transgender. All of a sudden, it's wall to wall on Fox News, which ignores whenever there are school shootings. You know, first of all, it's brutal and just uh, heart wrenching when you see what happens to families, and we condemn every shooter, no matter who they are. The way they're keying in on this and trying to blame trans people and drugs and this and that. I mean, part of it is they need to take the attention away from that we need better gun laws, right? And they've always focused in on the mental health component. And this shooter had a lot of mental health issues. There's no question about it. And was some of that tied to being trans in this society? Probably. Was some of that tied to struggling in a society like this? Yes. But, like a lot of shooters, the ideologies are all over the place. There's all this anti-Semitic stuff and sort of pro-Hitler stuff. And then there's this anti-Trump stuff and pro-equality stuff. So, they're often very confused people. But the bottom line is the vast majority of shooters, mass shooters, are cisgender white men. And, the New York Post had demonic transgender shooter, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, how come they don't have white male shooter? They never do that. And what was the last big shooting in Minnesota? A MAGA extremist who shot legislators and their spouses in their homes. And he was a total MAGA extremist. So if there's an ideology that's most prevalent among mass shooters, it's right-wing ideology. And if there's a color and gender, and it's a cisgender white male. So to me, that's really, what we need to keep pointing out. And we need to keep pointing out that around the world, there are many people who are having mental health issues, whether they're trans, cisgender, white, black, brown, women, men, but they don't have mass shootings in those places like this. And that is about the guns. Of course, there's always mental health everywhere, but there's no higher percentage of people with mental health issues in this country than any place else. What I really, though, was angry about was seeing Fox News trying to claim that trans people are more violent. I saw Sean Hannity saying this when, in fact, trans people are disproportionate. He said disproportionately they are more violent. No, they are disproportionately the victims of violence more than any group in this
Yeah,
country.
yeah. It's impossible to imagine believing that if you know anything about bullying, if you grew up in America, it's like the idea that I was ever bullied as a result of the fact that I was straight or marginalized or minimalized just for being, interested in women. Like it's not Rachel Campos Duffy this week said, she's the Fox News woman married to Sean Duffy, who's the transportation secretary. They're all MAGA'd up. That Christians are the most persecuted as a result of the shooting taking place at a Catholic school, which he, by the way, went to and his mom worked at. And we can talk about the Catholic Church, obviously, but she said that Christians are the most persecuted, I think, religious group. And of course, Christian nationalists have all of the power, most of the power across the federal government, certainly at the Supreme Court, in Congress, and in the White House. So that's how she played it, and I wonder what your reaction is to that comment and to that belief, because they do believe not only that white people overwhelmingly think they're more discriminated against than people of color. What do you make of that victim persecution mentality of people who actually are in charge and have all the power?
Well, in both cases, they've just sort of, you know, rationalized a way to continue to promote their racism and their dominance, right? Christianity is the dominant religion in this country, and religious minorities are always under threat. They're always mocked, intimidated, discriminated against, whether it's Jews, whether it's Muslims, whatever the group is. And so, this is just a way for them, because we now have laws that say you can't, or we at least we have had a lot of laws that say you can't privilege this religion. They see that as discrimination. They see that as they're being victimized because they believe we're in a Christian country. So now you're taking Christianity out of the country. So therefore, we are the ones victimized. The same thing with their claiming they're victimized, as white people. They're seeing the power balance change. They're seeing us moving toward becoming a majority non-white country. And they're realizing that they are not going to have the representation they previously had. Somehow to them, that's discrimination. And so they rationalize this idea of ruling from the minority, which is really on the racial thing, what they're trying to do. I mean, they're kind of looking at South Africa of decades ago as the model.
Last question, Mike, and I'm so glad to talk to you. And if people aren't subscribed to your Substack and following you on social media and listening to you on SiriusXM, they're missing out, because no one does it better. And you've been doing it. Maybe no one does it long, old now, but you've been at it for a long time, and you're probably one of the most respected people in journalism and media, certainly around human rights and gay rights over the years. And so I guess I wanted to ask you, your perspective on the state of gay rights in America, whether or not you think a gay marriage, Obergefell, could be overturned by this Christian nationalist Supreme Court. It would seem that throughout our careers, things were getting better and better, more rights, more opportunity, less harm and damage, and things were trending in the right direction. And now you have to paint over the rainbow flag crosswalk, take down the rainbow flags, and gays are again being openly persecuted. And so it's pretty disheartening to see the gains and then see some of them lost. But I wanted to get your perspective on where things are at with the LGBT community in terms of rights won and lost, I guess.
Well, there's no question that all of it is under threat, and marriage equality is threatened as well, in a variety of ways, whether they overturn Obergefell or not. And I do think there will be a attempt to do that. I do think it will get to the Supreme Court, and I think we should all be very concerned. But whether they do that or not, they're already stripping away at marriage equality the way they did with abortion by limiting gay and lesbian couples and their rights. Public accommodations, a wedding hall can turn you away, a florist can turn you away, or this online database can turn you away. So they're already carving out exceptions, and it's what they've done in the past on other issues. I think that we all have to realize that it will always be under threat. Look at what's happened to civil rights for African Americans in this country. Look at how things have been stripped going from the civil rights movement until now. Look at what we're seeing with voting rights. Look at what we're seeing with women. Look at what we're seeing with abortion rights. I wrote a book in 2015 called It's Not Over. And the premise of the book was that too many people in the LGBTQ community and those who support them think, you arrive. They think it's done. And I think it's probably true of every group. They think it's done. We've won. Oh, it's never coming back. It's not happening. Well, the other side, they have nothing else to do. I mean, they have nothing else to do. They've built enormous think tanks. They've built enormous organizations. They've built legal firms, and it's their livelihood. One, two, it's their reason for being, is to strip away the rights of other people. So you have to constantly be on guard and constantly be vigilant. The biggest enemy has been complacency, where people think, oh, we've won, we can just pack up and go.
Complacency and apathy, something you and I have been fighting our whole lives and careers, and don't plan to stop ever. at all. And I am so grateful and thankful to have you here and have you in my life and as a mentor and a friend. And I appreciate you reaching
Oh,
out to me the other
it's
day.
so great to connect with you, Pete. And we go way back and on
Yeah.
Sirius XM and, you know, just kind of talking about all these issues. And here we are in a whole different world. And it's kind of horrifying, but at least we all have each other.
We should have a conversation. I don't know if I actually don't know if you and I have ever really had like a public or even private conversation about like masculinity and all that conversation that everybody seems to be having now. But it would be an interesting thing I feel like to have with you and I.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I don't know. Sometimes I think especially about you, like you've always been open and talked about, you know, gay rights and your own life and so on. But I don't know. I probably always saw you as a gay man, like third or fourth. I just always saw you as like an elder. I really did. And I don't mean that
Mm.
like, but you had been in this. You'd been a print journalist. You'd done journalism. You'd been in the fight. You are one of the players in kind of human rights, much less gay rights, and then a broadcaster and a good person. But you know, at some point, sexual orientation came in. The best thing ever was that the channel OutQ. I always thought that was a great thing that SiriusXM did, and the terrible that it went away. But that's when I
Mhm.
met you. You're on that channel. I feel like that was a lot of safety and liberation for people. I don't know. Anyway, masculinity and men next time.
Oh yeah, you know, all insecurity and fear. Period. We'll get into it.
Yeah, yeah. Looking forward to it. Yeah. All right, Mike. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you everybody for
Thank
watching
you,
live.
Pete.
I'm going to hit end and say bye to Mike, but thank you all. Go listen to Mike. Go subscribe
Thank you.
to his Substack, get his book, follow him on social media, and please support Michelangelo Signorile as he always has me and my work. Thank you for watching. Happy Friday. I'll talk to you later. End stream.